So one of the things that I remember, like I've seen like argued by a lot of people, maybe more so on the left of economics, who would say, this constant boom and bust cycle is not inevitable. It's just like a function of the way our markets are set up. But what you're saying is that, or at least what it seems you're saying, is that if you go back 300 years to 1720 or 301 years, or that we see the same basic underlying factors causing like bubbles and that boom and bust cycle. Like, do you think that's just kind of like an inevitable thing? Are bubbles just human nature in a way? Do you know, like people love to jump on a good bandwagon. People love the idea of getting rich quick without having to do much. It's like that kind of like secret knowledge that people enjoy. Like, is this cycle an inevitable thing?
So the boom and bust cycle and the existence of financial bubbles are slightly different. Think about a cycle. People sometimes talk about a cycle like the business cycle, but it doesn't have a fixed length. Whenever a cycle doesn't have a fixed length, all you're really saying is that sometimes the economy is growing and sometimes the economy is shrinking. The economy grows whenever people come up with new technology or people increase their working hours, and then it shrinks, usually due to an external shock like a new disease. And to me, that just seems inevitable. It's, to say, to defeat the business cycle, you would need to defeat like hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, just all kinds of natural disasters, because that's the type of thing that causes the economy to shrink. So to say that we can prevent that from happening, I don't think is true. Financial bubbles are a little bit different from the boom and bust cycle. One of the arguments that we make throughout the book is that bubbles aren't this sort of naturally occurring fact of nature. What people don't realize is that between 1929 with the Wall Street crash and the Japanese bubble during the 1980s, we had almost no major financial bubbles. And the reason for that is that finance was more repressed. There was a lid on it. It was, if you like, controlling the marketability side of the bubble triangle. And when we started seeing financial bubbles come up again was with the financial liberalization of the Reagan and Thatcher era. So bubbles happen for a reason. They happen, as we say, because of a spark, a government policy, loose monetary policy, speculation. And when these things aren't in place, bubbles don't really happen, or they happen in a much smaller scale. You have maybe a bubble in comic books or in Beanie Babies, these things that don't affect the overall economy, but these large-scale housing and stock market bubbles, they happen for a reason. They're not purely cyclical, if that means anything.
Yeah. So what you're saying is basically like the ebb and flow of like businesses becoming successful and sort of, then fading away through like, I don't know, technological advancement, or no one likes them anymore, or they just do a bad job, or they're poorly managed. That's not inevitable. But what is inevitable, that is inevitable. But the like extreme bubbles that sort of come from speculation or loose regulation is something that is not. So why do you think it is then between 1929 and the 1980s that there wasn't that? Like, is it just regulation? Were people put in place after 29 that people were like, well, we can't let this happen again, and then sort of slowly those were untangled?
So it wasn't so much 29 that triggered it, but the Great Depression of the early 30s that triggers financial regulation and regulation of banks. And this stops banks essentially lending too much to risky borrowers. And that regulation is applied across the world. So all of a sudden the fuel for...
So is it like an international...
Totally. So once you get to the 1930s, you've got an international monetary system. You've got an international regulatory system. Different countries applied it in slightly different ways, but they all what's called repress their financial systems. And they did it for a variety of reasons. To help fund governments and to channel money into the government bond markets. You force banks, insurance companies and others to buy government bonds. That means they can't lend to people wanting to buy their homes, for example. And so they're not doing these sort of risky types of loans.
Okay, so then what sort of, more broadly, like what are they trying to stop when they're making this regulation? Like what are the things they're putting the brakes on?
So they're preventing companies. So some really specific examples here. So in the UK, for example, you couldn't lend to people who were speculating on property. And we know property markets are very dangerous because when they collapse, banks collapse. So if you actually stop banks lending to property developers in the first place, also stopped banks lending to other speculative parts of the economy, they would have required banks to hold a lot of their assets in the form of cash and very safe short-term government bonds. So basically banks weren't taking a lot of risk. They were being, in effect, told what to do with the deposits they were raising.
You also had a lot of capital controls. So a major feature of the bubbles from 1980 onwards is money from all over the world flowing into a particular asset and then flowing out again almost as quickly as it arrived. So you look at the bubbles in Southeast Asia in the 1990s. This was sort of classic emerging economy bubbles. Money flows in and pumps prices up, and then money flows out again. Between the 1930s and the 1980s, or maybe through sort of the mid 1970s, it sort of gradually eroded. Money couldn't cross borders very easily, so this type of thing didn't happen.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the things that I was really shocked actually to learn was that before the Big Bang, basically with Thatcher's sort of deregulation, that this was a thing that like you couldn't move money outside of the country very easily. I mean, which is like completely inconceivable to me in 2021. It's like, what do you mean I can't move money out of the country? Like this? Do you think that it's a realistic thing to even suggest that we could reimpose those in the modern world, or is that just gone with the internet because having erased so many borders?
Well, China does it. China still has capital controls. Not many countries are as powerful, have as much state capacity as China, but if you want to do it and you have the power to do it, it is still an option. Some countries still try and fail, but yeah, China's one of the world's biggest economies, and it does it. So, yeah, they're still with us.
Okay. So, basically, then the next thing I want to ask about is the what causes the bubbles. So, what leads to that situation? So, we've talked about the marketability, credit, and speculation. But I want to get like more specifically into then what that leads to that means that like prices inflate out of control. So yeah, how does that happen? Like how do the three factors, the marketability, the credit or money, and the speculation then sort of lead to the prices becoming so inflated?
So this is okay. So first of all, you need the spark, and what the spark does. Let's say a new technology. Let's talk about one of the, I suppose the examples in the book, the bicycle mania of the 1890s. Okay. So you get this new technology emerging. So ball bearings, pneumatic tires, the well-less tubes, and you get these technologies merging to form the modern bicycle. Okay, that then gets people excited about this new technology. And companies are beginning to set up, and all these investors are seeing this new technology, and they're buying shares in these companies as they float in the stock exchange. And it's relatively easy to do so now because there's been changes to the, if you like, the regulation on the stock exchange, which allows companies to issue £1 shares, even less. So that brings speculation, it sort of democratizes it, brings it into the realm of, the working classes, working around Birmingham, working around Manchester, outside London. And then interest rates in this period are super low. So people aren't getting a great return in their bank accounts or on their government bonds. So they're looking to the stock market and they begin investing in speculative assets. So one of the speculative assets they invest in is then bicycles. And so people start buying these shares, and other people observe people buying these shares and doing well. They read the local newspapers and they see the price of such and such a company has gone up, and then they go out and they keep buying and they keep buying, and that's what really drives that sort of narrative. I've got this share and it's doubled in price over the past 2 weeks. That's the sort of narrative that's then driving the prices upwards.
So you said the 1890s.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. You wouldn't have imagined that people people would have had the capital or the ability to invest, more than just say the aristocracy at that point, to invest in anything. So was that like a practice that was going on? Were they like the 1890s versions of like the crypto punks?
So what you observe actually over time is that initially, the first bubble we look at, it's the elite that are buying the shares of companies, because it's £100 a pop, if not more. You have to be super wealthy. But over time, what we observe with all these bubbles and with the stock market in general, it's opened up, it's democratized, and so more and more people are able to buy shares in companies. And we see this, particularly when you get to the 1890s, a lot of working class people putting their savings into the stock market. So bicycle companies, breweries. So there was like 300 plus breweries floated on the London Stock Exchange and other stock exchanges in the UK in the 1890s. Again, a lot of working class savers putting their money into brewery shares.
Wow. So they were investing in the pub and how they got home from the pub.
Exactly. Wow, yes.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.